Just one quick point on the previous thing. Fannie and Freddie actually don't make loans, never did make loans. They buy loans on the secondary market. And the ones who are actually making the subprime and the alt-pay loans were your WAMUs and your IndyMacs and others. What Fannie and Freddie did is they then bought them on the secondary market and went forward. So the crux of the problem was a little bit closer to the mortgage and the people who are actually passing those out. So we need to take that account. You know, I'm all for the interstate competition. It was in the healthcare bill. We now will allow people to buy healthcare across state lines. I think that's a critical piece of it. But as I said earlier, the key issue here is cost control. And cost control requires a lot of effort and a lot of change. And I think the main way I'm going to focus on strengthening the healthcare bill going forward is to make sure that that cost control gets implemented. And it's not going to be easy. Because understand, long before healthcare reform was passed, our healthcare system was busted. We are going to have a tough time fixing it, and it ain't over by any stretch of the imagination.
You voted for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. You've done nothing to bring an end to them, as well as military actions in Pakistan. I feel that if I voted for you, I'm voting to support unjust, illegal, or immoral wars. Can you convince me otherwise?
Well, I think I can convince you, first of all, particularly in Afghanistan and Pakistan, that we have a legitimate national security interest over there. And, you know, part of the problem is that is a very nasty neighborhood. But Al-Qaeda in both Pakistan and Afghanistan and their Taliban allies are the ones who struck us and hit us, and we have to focus on them. Now, I will convince you of this. We need to begin to draw down our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I have supported that, certainly supported that in Iraq. Now in Afghanistan, what we're trying to do is get ourselves in a position where at least some form of local government or something can stand so that when we pull out, we don't go right back to the Taliban and Al-Qaeda running the place. I, disagree about the war in Afghanistan being unfair and unjust. And I disagree that our efforts to target the terrorists who threaten us is unfair or unjust. I do agree that a long-term massive troop presence in Afghanistan is wrong, irresponsible, and not good for this country.
Okay, well, I wasn't in Congress when those got voted on, but committing the troops to war is something, as a warrior, as a combat veteran, something, if I ever have to vote on whether to allow the president to take our troops to war, I'm going to have to weigh very considerably. Because let me tell you, I've had too many of my friends come home injured or come home in body bags. And so, despite the fact that I'm a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, I'm not a warlike warrior. I believe that we should only use the troops when we have to. And then when we use them, we need to have a plan, an exit plan, like Colin Powell says, to get them out of there. I think the problem what Bush did in Afghanistan is when we won the war, we probably should have exited at the Northern Front and say, job well done, and got out of there. Afghanistan is ungovernable, and I don't think, no matter how much time and money we spend there, we're going to win that. Iraq, we got the same thing, we got the same problem, but when the surge happened, we needed to support the troops, and despite the one vote that you took, we need to support the troops when they're over there in harm's way and all the time. If they get committed, commit them all the way.
Why do you spend more time talking about your opponent than your own accomplishments?
Talking to me?
Yep.
Well, we need to compare ourselves. We need to compare votes. You're here to make a choice. And I look at Adam's voting record, and I look at his conservative union rating, and then I see that he's got a more liberal rating than even Jim McDermott from Seattle. I kind of say, wow, I wouldn't have voted that way. There was a lot of votes you took, I wouldn't have taken. And that's what we need to make a compare. We make our case to the people. This is how he voted, how I would have done it differently. And then you vote, you choose. You look at our qualifications, you look at our levels of integrity, our intelligence, our commitment to our families and communities, and you make a decision of who's going to represent you. You're hiring, we're doing a job interview in front of about 200,000 to 300,000 voters. And whoever gets 50% or more gets hired. And that's the difference. So we compare the voting records. And my voting record on the council is fair game. Anything I did well, or is he considered as bad, should be brought out there and broadcast.
Just say that overall, I agree, and I think one of the tough parts about being involved in politics is people know they don't like it, but they have a sort of broad view of what they don't like, and sometimes what really angers them is simply a part of the process. And I do think that when you're running for office, and there's two people running, it is fair to compare records. And go at the record and say, here's my opponent did, I don't agree with it, that's why I think I'd do a better job. Now, I think you also have to put your own record out there. I also think that when you're talking about your opponent's record, you have to be accurate. And while we're talking about it, my lifetime rating with this particular conservative group is 15%. Jim McDermott's is 2%. So I'm not sure how you say that I have a more liberal voting record. Well, actually, I do know. There was one very interesting vote. We had a vote